Perfect. In this video, we're going to look at what classes are. And now things are starting to get a bit more complicated in this Python course, since classes are a bit more complex. Classes and object-oriented programming. .ipnd. Let's create our notebook. Perfect. We've selected our kernel, as always, the Python one. Alright, and now quite a bit of theory, because things are starting to get a bit more substantial. So these are classes and object-oriented programming. Alright, perfect. Well, a generic function of what a class is. A class is a template for creating objects. Objects are instances of classes that can have attributes, data, methods, and functions. Perfect. I guess everyone is just like me. No one understood anything. Perfect. So now, I'm just going to give you a couple of theoretical examples so you can understand me, okay? And now we're going to explain a little more. Basically, a class, just like a function, encapsulates code, like when we take a loop and put it inside a function, or we take several lines of code and put them in a function so we can reuse that function, right? Well, a class, basically, if you want to look at it my way, is that, it contains several functions, okay? In this case, what is a class used for in real life? Well, they're useful for modeling things or concepts in programming in an organized way, okay? Let's use the example of a bank account, which is what we're going to do today. Basically, a bank account, what does a bank account have? Well, it will have, first of all, the account itself. Then, in a bank account you can, deposit money, you can withdraw money. A bank account has an account holder, right? Each of these examples, is a function that, for example, depositing could be a few lines of code that put money into the account. So now you have a bit of the concept that it includes functions or includes methods or attributes. And this is called a class, okay? Perfect. So the characteristics of a class are basically these. Let's list the characteristics here. And basically a class is a template for creating objects, right? A template for creating functions. Call it that if you want. So it has attributes, variables inside a class to store information about the object. If, for example, a client could be rich, another one poor, another could be someone who comes to the bank a lot, you know? Those are attributes that the class has. And the methods, as I was saying, are the functions that the class contains, deposit underscore money, withdraw underscore money, right? And when all of this is created, I mean, when the class is already created, then we have an instance. And an instance is basically an object, right? That's where object-oriented programming gets its name. And you can take that instance and, for example, call functions within those instances, okay? Let's start with an example of a class. A class is defined like this. Class, you give it a name, parentheses, or actually, you don't need parentheses, and just a colon. So, what does it have? What are the components of a class? First of all, a constructor called init, which has self inside. As you can see, it looks like a function, right? So, to create a class, we always need to have a first function called init, and it has a parameter here called self, okay? This is the constructor. Self will be used to create the whole class, alright? And then, as we said, it will have its methods. Method 1 with itself, right? And then method 2. Method 2 with itself, right? There, perfect. So now the class would be created, okay? And we would have, well, you need to put a return here so it returns something. Perfect. And the only thing left is the instance, which would be this, the name. So now, this name is an object, and I can call this name. Let's create it. Expectorating blog, after OK. Method 1, we wanted the blog after 9, too. All right. I don't think this is it. It's impossible. Oh, okay. Let's see. All right, okay. Here we're missing. This was fine. Here we need the pass. In the return, an indentation, and here too. And if I remember correctly, return, and then the name. And the name is outside the class. Let's see. Oh, here, look, check this out. I forgot to add it. There's a mistake. Look at this. There's a typo. It was supposed to be an underscore, but I didn't see it and it was messing up the whole exercise. Now it's right. Now we have the name. If we put a dot after the name, we can access the methods. So we have the init, method 1, and method 2. Just so you see, this is called, an object, okay? And you can access the functions it has inside. Perfect. So, with that said, let's make a real class and let's stop with the examples. But this would be the structure of a class. Basically, you define the class, add its constructor, add the methods, and then you just call the class. I mean, by calling the class, I mean creating an instance of the class, okay? And well, to create an instance, basically, you use a variable, you give it a name, okay? And instantiating a class is always like this. You put the class name with parentheses, and as you can see, it's the same. But to create an instance of a class, you always do this, assign it to a variable and add the parentheses, okay? So now, we have all the methods. Let's get started. We're going to do the bank account example, okay? And everything will become much clearer. So now we define a class. We'll call it bank account, and what we want to do is this: withdraw money, deposit money, and know how much balance we have. All of these are methods that need to be added. So, when defining a class, you need to add a constructor called init, and it will have a self inside. All right, got it. So now, the question is, what attributes does my class have? What do I mean by attributes? Well, every bank account has an owner, right? It's not a method, it's an attribute, which means that every bank account, regardless of whether you deposit, withdraw money, or want to check the balance, which are like functions that this bank account performs, well, every bank account has an owner. Owner. Owner, perfect. What else does a bank account have as an inherent attribute? Well, when you open a bank account, it always starts with a balance of 0, right? Perfect. So now we can see that self is in a light blue color, and owner and balance are kind of gray. Because for these attributes to, let's say, light up or make sense, what we have to do is use the constructor self, put a dot, and then set the attribute and assign it to the attribute. And as you can see, owner just lit up. Just like with balance, we have to do the same thing, use the constructor self. The attribute equals the attribute. Alright, so now our constructor would be well defined and would have its attributes, which are owner and balance. Let's continue. Now we're going to make the first method, okay? The first method. Well, let's go over a bit of theory. It would be, we want to create the methods for the bank account. So, the first is deposit. Then, what are we going to do? Withdraw. And then, the other method would be, checking the balance. Check balance. These are the three methods we want to develop, okay? So, def deposit. And since we're working with classes, this method will always take self, its constructor, so that we can, let's say, work with it. So, what attribute will deposit take? Well, an amount of money, right? And as we can see, it's turned light gray. And what we're going to do now is, use self, and we would have to set the amount and assign it, let's say, to the amount. However, let's think about something. What does depositing depend on? It depends on the balance attribute. You're putting it in, you're depositing into the balance, right? So, when you deposit, what happens? You always deposit money, it's always positive. So, let's make the constructor depend on the balance, okay? And whenever you want to deposit, you're going to deposit money. In other words, you're going to add money. So, we use a plus equals sign and the amount we want to deposit. Alright, so all of this is going to make sense. Basically, I just said, I want to add a positive amount because I'm depositing where? Into my balance. And from here, the method would be created. Okay, and to check that the function works correctly, let's add a little comment that I'm going to copy, alright? Which is simply, you already know this one, it just prints the amount that was deposited and then tells me the new balance we have, okay? It's just to check that when I ran the method, it worked correctly. To be withdrawn. How do we withdraw? Well, it would be the same. Withdraw, self, comma, and an amount, okay? Because we want to withdraw a certain amount of money. So now it would be the opposite, right? We're going to self. We want to modify the balance, but this time we want to do it in the negative. Sorry, we're going to do it as a negative, meaning it would be negative to withdraw the amount, okay? But in this case, we're going to let's check more carefully, because the balance can never be withdrawn. You can never withdraw the balance itself. In other words, you can never withdraw an amount of money that exceeds your balance, okay? If you have 1,000 euros in your account, you can withdraw 1,000 euros, but you can't withdraw 1,100. Therefore, your balance always has to be greater than the amount you want to withdraw, okay? So, the parameter would already be defined. And now what's left is to do what we did above, which is, to withdraw balance, right? So let's finish this first. Insufficient funds, okay? Okay, it's just that I'm doing something wrong that you can't see, alright? Here, when it comes to withdrawing, you can withdraw money, right? By subtracting the amount, or that would be one option. You can subtract money, but you can't subtract more money than you have. if you have 1,000 euros, you can't withdraw 1,100. So it would be a conditional. So if the balance is less or no, wait. If the balance is less than the amount you want to withdraw, right? You have insufficient funds, right? If not, if you want to withdraw 100 euros and you have 1,000 euros in your account, right? Well, it would just be like the previous command. I want to withdraw an amount from my balance, right? Print. Alright, let's copy it. Perfect. So it would be the option. You have withdrawn an amount and your new balance is such and such, right? Perfect. So now the last thing we have left to do is to make the method for checking the balance. So same thing, a function to get the balance, right? Again, the constructor for self, 3 dots. And what do I want to see? Just self balance, just to check what balance I have. Alright, with that said, I'll make a variable called account. I instantiate my class, right? Bank account. And now, in my bank account, as we saw in my constructor, I set 2 attributes, which were owner and balance, right? So now I think if I run this code, I think it's going to give me an error. Here it's telling me it's seeing the colons in the if statement. Let's see what comes up. It tells me the bank account constructor needs you to set the owner, otherwise it won't work. And I also have to set the initial balance. Oh, well, the initial balance is already 0, right? Because I defined it here. So you have to at least set the owner. Let's put Fran, okay? We enter the code in the bank account. The bank account object is now properly defined, right? Perfect. So now let's play around with this. We have our account, right? And as we said, our account is currently at 0. Well, our account is going to request our balance. Get balance. As you can see by the dot, now you can, go into the class and use this function to check the balance we have. So I think like this. Let's see. Get balance. Alright, perfect. When I call the function, which is inside my object, which is the account, inside the class, see how cool that is. I've already made an object in Python that has 3 classes, right? And I've called the first class, the first function, get balance. Right now I have 0 euros, okay? Why do I have 0 euros? Because I defined it here, okay? So, since I have 0 euros, what I'm going to do now is put money in. Account dot deposit. And we're going to put in 500 euros, alright? Okay, so 500 has been deposited. Your new balance is 500. Perfect. Now I'm going to try to withdraw 1,000 euros, okay? And let me remind you what we have written. I'm going to try to withdraw 1,000 euros. Let's see what happens. Oh, well, look, I withdrew 1,000 euros and it left me with a balance of minus 500. This means that my function failed here because it should have told me insufficient funds. Let's take a look at what happened. It's incorrectly defined. If the amount is greater than the balance, I think I explained it correctly verbally, that's why. To the balance, okay? Insufficient funds. If not, it can be subtracted. Oh, wait, okay, you have to add the colon, remember? Perfect. We created the function again, we fixed it. Check balance, €0. We deposit 500 euros. Perfect. And now I'm going to try to withdraw 1,000 euros from my bank account when I only have 500. You can't. You have 500 euros in your account. It tells you here and doesn't let you. Perfect. So let's try to withdraw 100 euros. Let's see if it lets us. Perfect. 100 has been withdrawn. The new balance is 400. Alright, so these would be the classes. The classes in Python, okay? Basically, that's it. Just remember the concept. Or an object called a class, which has several functions, or rather, several attributes, like the owner, the balance, and several methods, which are the functions that happen in the bank account. Withdraw, deposit, check the balance. You know? All of these functions are related to the bank account, and everything is in one class. Okay, I hope everything was clear. See you in the next video.